After realizing the massive betrayal that has come from Kyle, our hero Ryu and his slave girls Rora and Sarah need to be prepared for the upcoming battle. Luckily, he and his team have been able to build a strong fortress in a very short amount of time. The enemy forces come to the battleground, but are shocked to see how efficient Ryu has shown himself to be. Kyle is told by one of his men that Ryu and his army have built their camp along the river. They have 3 entrances from where an attack can be possible, which would prove to be a much better option than trying to cross the river to flank them. Of course, villains don't like to be put on the back foot like Kyle, and he wonders what to do because Lord Gerhard had given him some very clear orders. Obviously, those orders can't be disregarded, but Kyle doesn't want to hear such advice from his soldiers. He gives it a thought, but takes some time, so one of his knights asks him if he's done with his wishful thinking. With no other option in front of him, the villain says that he must prepare for a full frontal attack. He states that his opposition consists of only 2,000 soldiers, which is not a lot when compared to the number of men he has with him. The fortress and canal might be a nice touch, but they won't be able to stand up to the force that Kyle has brought with him. It's time for a motivational speech, so Kyle tells his men to gather around him. He makes a promise by the name of Lord Gerhard and says that the soldiers can take whatever they plunder from this attack. Basically, they are being given a free pass to steal anything they'd like, so they have the motivation to give it their best shot. The men shout and scream with passion, so Kyle reassures himself that he is not going to lose this battle. He is told that everything is ready for him, so he raises his sword and orders his men to charge at the camp. The energy is loud and clear right from the start, which means that Ryu has his task cut out for him. He gets news of what Kyle has told his soldiers about plundering, and he figures that it's not what he had thought would happen. Anyway, there is no point in thinking about this, so Leone gets ready for the first round of attack. She tells her men to hold their bows and arrows so that they can fire their weapons at the right time. Tensions run high as the enemy soldiers charge in with all their might, but Leone holds her ground till the time is right. Soon enough, the soldiers come within the perfect firing line, so the lion girl tells her men to fire their arrows. With that, the first squad unleashes its arrows upon the enemy soldiers and an intense scene follows. As expected, Kyle's men take some brutal hits and the losses begin to mount. His lead Solider is a bit confused to see what's happening, so he tells his men not to back down over such a simple attack. They still have numbers on their side, so the soldiers are urged to continue moving forward. Even Kyle loses his mind over how useless some of his soldiers are, especially when he has offered them all kinds of riches. He orders them to charge once again, but Leone has realized that Kyle is all bark and no bite. His men do not follow any kind of formation, and even their weapons are not that good. She wants to take the advantage, so she orders the second squad to fire their arrows as well. The sight she sees in front of her is rather funny because she did not expect to fight such useless soldiers. As a matter of fact, she doesn't see how they are going to win this battle because Ryu is so much better than Kyle. The enemy soldiers continue to take damage, and things are not looking too good for them. The only thing in their favor right now is the number of men on their side, which is why some of them are able to progress further to the front of the fortress. They do their best to reach their target zone, but our hero has it all planned right from the start. The third squad steps forward now, and Leone orders them to pierce each and every one of the useless soldiers trying to climb on top of the gate. As expected, a barrage of arrows follow and take down all the soldiers that manage to get close. Of course, they are going to keep coming at our hero, so Leone pushes her men to keep piercing through their garbage opponents. Kyle notices that his men are unable to break through any of Ryu's defenses, and he wonders why this is the case. He thinks back to all the intel he got on our hero, but it doesn't make sense because he feels that there aren't enough people on the other side to cause so much damage. That's when it hits him that the commoner folk that he likes to call peasants might also be a part of Ryu's army. The lead knight has had enough of this humiliation, so he tells Kyle that they should give it a rest for now. There's no way they're going to make any progress this way, so they should just retreat for now and come back with a better formation. Naturally, this doesn't go down well with Kyle because his ego is larger than his whole body. He tells his knight boy to shut up because he is not going to back down at this pace. He keeps saying that his side has way too many soldiers to retreat, so the question begs to be asked as to why he is not seeing any success. After all, he doesn't think that peasants are good enough to fight proper soldiers. The lead knight boy says that the resistance at the southern gate is way too strong for them to get through, and we continue to see their soldiers being taken down by Leone's squads. He says once again that they are not going to be able to break through any of the entrances this way, so they should really try another formation. However, he gets smacked across the face because Kyle doesn't like what he's saying. He even asks the knight boy if he thinks that nobles are to be taken as fools. He does not care what the cost may be, because he has to do well for Lord Gerhard. The knight boy is humiliated by this slap, But he can't do anything about it because Kyle is still the boss. With no other option to choose from, the villain decides to take the lead and go to the front. He tells his men that they should target the central gate, and they all scream in approval. Watching all of this with a bird's eye view is none other than Ryu himself. He notices that the enemy has finally decided to make a move, but it's not the one he was expecting. Our hero had actually thought that Kyle and his men would retreat by this point, but the enemy has decided to take a huge risk by proceeding with their attack. It's not normal for knights to carry out such an operation, so Ryu wonders what's pushing Kyle to behave this way. It could be that the villain wants to end this battle once and for all, but that would be too simple an answer to Ryu's question. He decides to ask his own knight boy if he knows anything about Kyle, so that he can assess his character. Ryu learns that his enemy is actually a very selfish man with no regard for anyone else but himself. He is also known for being a devious, cowardly wimp, and the knight boy decides to give a very detailed description on how he feels about Kyle. In the middle of this rant, we learn that Kyle had lost a duel with Mikhail in the past, and his nose became crooked due to that loss. It turns out that he's taken that loss to heart, which could be one of the reasons why he turned over to the dark side. The knight boy is mainly mad at Kyle because of his betrayal, because he was once touted to be the main knight to serve Princess Lupi. The knight boy continues to curse Kyle for his behavior, but Ryu has heard enough, so he asks him to stop with the whining. Our hero tells him that while he does understand why he's mad at Kyle for being a traitor, he also has no interest in hearing stories about personal grudges. Anyway, at least he realizes that Kyle is known for being sly, so he puts his brains to work once again. Ryu finds it hard to believe that a man like Kyle would go on to use such a deadly risk because whatever he heard in that rant most definitely did not sound anything like a man who would lead his knights against the odds. Also, this is the same man who betrayed his master not too long ago, so something definitely seems shady. To abandon the same men who shared their sorrows and joy with him, only to become the personal slave of Duke Gerhardt doesn't sound like a very wise move. That's when it strikes Ryu that maybe Kyle is not retreating because he doesn't have the option to do so. The knight boy is confused to hear this, but Ryu realizes that Kyle is desperate to get the results in his way so that he can impress Duke Gerhardt with his performance. There's no point in beating around the bush much longer, so Ryu decides to pull out his trump card. He calls out to the cute and curvy Rora because he needs her to get ready for a battle plan that they had decided to use. However, this is happening much sooner than was planned, so Rora asks her master if he really wants to do this. After all, this attack was planned to be used against the enemy when they would unleash the full force of their main strategy. However, Ryu is certain that now is the time to strike and even makes a joke about helping the enemy soldiers reach their makers since they clearly want to leave this world soon. It's time for things to end with a bang. And then we see some smoke coming out from the center of the fortress. This is brought to Kyle's attention, and his soldiers believe that they might just be able to break through the fortress after all. The villain is pleased to hear this and informs his men to alert everyone else in the army about this. Now, he lets out a battle cry as well because he genuinely believes that his men have broken through Ryu's impressive fortress. He orders his army to charge once again, and they do as he says, but all is not as it seems. Leone is not ready to let them in just yet, so she continues to order her squads to keep firing arrows at the enemy soldiers. A deadly sequence follows where Kyle's men continue to fall one after the other, but they do happen to make some progress in terms of making their opponents sweat. Ryu can see what's going on, but he urges his people to keep at it for now because he knows the payoff is going to be huge. His words seem to have the right kind of effect on his army as they continue to hold strong against the enemy attack. Kyle gets more impatient because he thought he had the advantage up until now. However, his men still have not been able to break through Ryu's fortress, so it spells bad news for him. As the battle continues to wager between both sides, Kyle wonders if the commander of his opposition is the famous adventurer that everyone has been talking about. He takes a look at Ryu and figures that he is the hero behind this master plan. Kyle does not understand what's so special about Ryu because he clearly does not look like the kind of boy who follows discipline. Some more time passes by, and Ryu's men have been able to keep the fortress in full flow, so our hero decides to stop playing silly games. He gives a look of passion and orders his knight boy to fire an arrow into the sky. Of course, this is meant to be a signal for Leone and Balls, so the knight boy unleashes the flaming arrow as soon as possible. Just like that, an epic visual is formed where the fire arrow goes up into the sky and catches the attention of the lion girl and her trusted sidekick. Kyle's soldiers have no idea what's going on, but this is when Balls decides to go hard at the enemy. He brings out the Crimson Lion mercenaries out of hiding, and now things are going to get very serious. Leone is proud of her clan because they showcase the true power she commands as a fighter. It's not over just yet as Balls and Leone both use their magical power to summon an energy like no other. They combine forces and bring out a double earth sync, which is as deadly a move as it sounds. Soon enough, the enemy forces start to hear something odd and begin to panic. After all, they don't know what they're dealing with, and even though some of them try to avoid any idle chats, it doesn't make any difference because most of the soldiers feel like something is about to happen. Kyle doesn't care for any of this, and he tries to urge his men to continue with the fight. As a matter of fact, he feels as if they might just break through the fortress if they keep up with their efforts for now. The villain has to eat his words as soon as he spits them out because some of his men come running in and say that there is a lot of water coming towards them. What follows is quite a brutal sight as Kyle watches all his men getting swept away by a massive tsunami wave. He can't believe his own eyes as hundreds of his men are taken down by this water move with ease. The villain shifts his focus to the fortress for a bit, and we can see that it is still standing strong. At the top of this fortress is our hero Ryu, who strikes a pose and watches on as his surprise attack has managed to win him this battle. He waits for some time because the water needs to clear out, so when everything has settled, he steps out of the fortress. Ryu takes a look at what he's done, and we can see tons of soldiers who have been drowned by the tsunami attack. Rora comes to the scene and comments that her master was right about the enemy forces not knowing how to swim. There are not many survivors who have come out of his predicament alive, but it was actually an easy move for Ryu. He goes on to explain to us that in order to swim, one must be able to learn it from a credible person. Since this is a world where living properly is quite hard, it would have been obvious that a lot of the enemy soldiers didn't have anyone teaching them how to swim when they were growing up. The only real way for a man to know swimming in this fantasy world is if he is a fisherman or a boatman. Rora is quick to pick up on Ryu's words, and she says that the knights were also worn down by their armor, which would normally be quite heavy. Our hero confirms that he had thought this out, and he comments that he has bought a few more days for his army thanks to this onslaught. There's no time for Ryu to rest, but his squads need to recover, so he tells his slave girl to tell all the forces to get some rest in turns. He does ask her to spare the scout guards because they will need to be active. Ryu also says that the enemy's bodies need to be buried, so that will also take up some time and effort. Rora wonders if her master is saying this because he wants to give the enemy a proper burial, but that is not the case with our hero. He explains that bodies of ended soldiers will only bring diseases to his existing soldiers, so it doesn't make sense for him to take that risk for now. Rora gives a cute look, but she is concerned that this battle might just become very deadly. Anyway, the main danger is gone for now, so everyone in this camp can breathe easy for a bit till their commander gives them the next plan of action. Of course, there is still a lot of work to do with regards to the enemy's bodies, so everyone in the camp gets to work instantly. Time passes by as we see a rather grim depiction of what happens during war. We are shown one group of people who are currently burying some of the bodies. Some of the men grow tired of their tasks, so they wonder if they really need to bury all of the bodies here. In the middle of them is a girl, who seems to be having a difficult time with the whole situation. She turns out to be the spy that Sarah had identified earlier, and is praying for the men who have fallen in the battle, so she does not like to hear the kind of talk being had in front of her. The men even consider plundering from these fallen men, but they are not allowed to do such a shameful thing. One of the men says that it's normal to plunder from the losing side in a war, so this should not be an issue for them. After all, Kyle's team might have attacked them with that very reason in mind as well. Before these men can discuss the topic any further, the girl asks them to stop with this nonsense. She says that it's their job to take care of these fallen men, and it won't do them any good to give in to their greed. Anyway, if they win the war, then they will get a much larger reward anyway. So, there is no reason to give in to their intrusive thoughts right now only to get punished later. The men don't buy what she's telling them, because they don't think they will get punished for what they are attempting to do. The girl might be cute, but she also has a keen sense of understanding, so she reminds the men that they're dealing with an S-tier commander. Not only is Ryu an expert in martial arts, he also has a strong sense of maturity when it comes to battle plans. This is why he can take down someone double size while also being able to pull off the tsunami attack without even flinching an eye. She then proceeds to ask the men to tell her what such a man would do if they were to go against his orders, which is pretty much like breaking a contract. The men realize that the cute spy girl is not here to mess around, so they just say that they were joking about plundering from the bodies. They also ask the girl not to say anything about this to anyone, and then they continue with their work. As expected, the girl is not too impressed with the way such people handle these situations, but she also does not realize that Sarah is keeping a close eye on her. We've had enough of the war scenes over here, so it's time to go to Lord Gerhardt for now. He is visited by Kyle, who may have survived the tsunami, but is still reeling from such an emphatic loss. Gerhardt says that he's surprised to see how Kyle still has the guts to show his face to him, especially after the miserable performance he put up against Ryan. The Lord jokes about at least praising the fact that Kyle has enough courage to face him at this moment. Kyle can only say sorry to his boss and says that he seriously regrets his lack of competence in the battleground. Gerhardt is actually shocked to see that the villain has survived the tsunami attack, so he wants to know how Kyle was able to do such a thing. It's not like Kyle has a very heroic story to tell his boss, but he needs to tell the truth, so he explains that his horse was able to swim through the tsunami, which was how he was able to survive the attack. Kyle was barely able to cling onto his life, but Gerhardt finds his tale to be quite interesting. He comments that Kyle has amazing luck because the horse he was riding was actually lent to him by Gerhardt himself. Either way, the evil lord has had enough of his fun and games, so he points his sword at the villain knight. He then goes on to say that the reports he had received of the battle actually had a whole other story to tell. This was the fact that Kyle had simply taken his horse and run away from the scene as soon as he could once he realized that there was no other method of escape. Basically, the leader of the army ended up abandoning his own men just so that he could come out of the whole ordeal alive. Kyle doesn't know what his master is going to do next, and he worries that he might just be breathing his last. In a surprising twist, Gerhardt says that he will not do something as savage just yet, and it might seem that he has the ability to read minds. The evil lord even tells Kyle not to sweat it because he will not end him so soon just like that. At the same time, this doesn't mean that he is going to forgive him either. He has a serious look on his face, so it's easy to tell that Gerhardt is not pleased with this outcome. He says that he is putting off his slave's punishment for now, but even then, Kyle will need to pay him back for all the soldiers he borrowed. After all, he was the one who pushed them to attack blindly without any proper formation. The villain knight has nothing left to say, so Gerhardt tells him to get away from his sight as soon as he can. After Kyle leaves, Gerhardt comments on how useless he is, and then his advisor asks him if it really was such a great idea to let Kyle go without any kind of repercussions. As expected, Gerhardt knows very well that he can't get rid of Kyle right now because he needs someone to lead his soldiers. On top of that, punishing Kyle will not make the loss go away. The primary cause of concern for the evil lord is that General Hadram has just arrived to the other side as well. The timing of Kyle's failure simply could not have come at a worse possible schedule. At the same time, Gerhardt knows that he can't just let the enemy gain the advantage and swallow him alive. The evil lord goes to a map to check out the current progress of the war, and he realizes that the main difference between the knights and the nobles is that the river has fallen into Ryu's hands. Gerhardt realizes that his opponent is not just a skilled fighter, but he also has the ability to make strategic decisions. After all, he made an amazing fortress and was also able to use the river's water to his advantage. The evil lord has lost a lot of soldiers due to this attack, so he wonders where exactly did Ryu come from. He obviously can't afford to take our hero lightly now, so he gets some more information on him and learns that he has come from another world. It's a bit surprising to Gerhardt, but he doesn't think too much about it and hopes for some of special soldiers to deal with it. Now, we shift back to Ryu, who is celebrating a tasty meal. He is also glad that the enemy soldiers have not come to attack them at night. Rora says that they wouldn't dare to do such a thing because they have already lost a lot of their soldiers. The enemy would most definitely need at least a few more days to reorganize their troops, and Ryu agrees with her. Even then, he does not want to take things lightly, so he says that he and his slave girls should prepare their special move while they still have time. This obviously has nothing to do with his intrusive thoughts, as he has come up with a plan to defeat the main soldiers of Gerhardt. It's time to test it out. So as the whole team feasts on a yummy meal, Balls says that they should try it as soon as they can. Leone also agrees with this method because she will be the one leading the operation. Ryu is glad to see that his team is following his orders, so he tells them to prepare 10 men before noon. With all of this set in motion, there's nothing much else to worry about, apart from one other issue, which is the spy girl. That's when we see Sarah acting cute while she introduces herself to the secret assassin. The spy girl is shocked to see her show up all of a sudden because she wasn't able to sense her presence. She wants to know who Sarah is, so she takes a wild guess and calls her the pot merchant. That is not the right answer, but Sarah continues to act cute and says that the spy girl came a little close. She then introduces herself and says that she is Ryu's slave girl. She begins to act very friendly and tells the spy girl that she knows she was the one who had to take on a bunch of rowdy men the other day. The spy girl has no idea why Sarah is being this way with her, but then the slave girl says that there aren't many girls in this camp who are the same age as her. This is why she wishes to talk to the spy girl, so it makes the secret assassin breathe a sigh of relief. However, she still wonders if this is a trap, so she doesn't know how to respond to Sarah. She takes a look at the slave girl's happy face and confirms whether she really is Ryu's bae. After all, it doesn't make sense for her to be hanging around here when her master is alone with his intrusive thoughts. That's when the slave girl asks Sarah if Ryu has gotten bored of her, and this leads to a hilarious situation. Sarah funnily sulks in a corner and wonders why she is here in the first place. As she laments her situation, the spy girl tries to apologize for what she has said. She tries to pass it off as a joke, but there is no other option right now apart from cheering up Sarah. The spy girl gives in and tells Sarah that she is going to take a break after finishing up with this work, so she doesn't mind chatting with her if she helps her out with her tasks. Sarah becomes cheerful again and starts saying weird things as if she is playing a video game. This is when we learn that the spy girl's name is Sakuya, and she wonders why the slave girl is acting so odd. Sarah finds the name Sakuya a bit unique, but then she shifts the topic to a bottle of special wine that she wants to open with her. The slave girl wishes to celebrate with Sakuya, so she says that they should drink to their heart's content. The spy girl is not too keen on this and says that she would never drink on the job as she is not that type of girl. Of course, her resistance is futile because it doesn't take long for her to start sipping on the wine and letting out loud screams of joy. Sakuya ends up drinking a bit too much wine for her own good and starts talking about how doing something like this while skipping work is the best possible feeling. Sarah doesn't know how to react to this, so she simply nods in approval for now. The spy girl has now turned over to the dark side, so she tells Sarah that she also needs to drink and she won't take no for an answer. The slave girl is left in a tough spot as Sakuya pushes the bottle into her soft cheeks. Sarah tells us that she had only intended for Sakuya to drink a little bit of the wine so that she can loosen up a bit. However, that has not gone as per her plan, so she prays to her master Ryu to help her out. The main twist though is that Sakuya is not drunk at all. Instead, she is simply trying to act drunk so that Sarah can lower her guard and spill out critical information. Meanwhile at the camp, our hero wonders if his slave girl is going to be alright. Rora tells him there's nothing to worry about because she knows her sister quite well. At the same time, Leonie wonders where her special bottle of wine has gone, so we know that she isn't going to get it back. Now, we move back to the spy girl and the slave girl, but things don't look very pretty. As a matter of fact, it seems as if Sakuya has just puked out some of the wine, so Sarah asks her if she is alright. She did just spit something sparkly out of her mouth, so the slave girl begins to show some concern. Sakuya insists that she is alright. And then she notices some men traveling via the river. She becomes interested in them, so she asks Sarah if she knows who they are. The slave girl thinks that these men are just merchants who have come here for some trades and are now going back home. The spy girl becomes alert once again, because she wants to know when these merchants came here. Sarah asks her if there is something wrong with those men, but Sakuya just brushes it off as some kind of defensive instinct. That's not the end of the drama though, as an army of crows suddenly arrive and fly over the girls. Sarah wonders why so many of these birds have suddenly appeared, but Sakuya seems to know something about it. Since there are a lot of crows and they are continuing with their cries, it means that something is going to happen tonight. The spy girl has nothing more to say, so she tells Sarah that they've had enough of a break and it's time to get back to work. She makes a shady face and says that it's almost dark, which seems to be a hint that there might be another attack soon. Now, we move forward to nighttime, and we see Sakuya preparing herself for a shady mission. She takes out a small bottle from a spot where no man has gone before and then she pours the liquid all over her sword. This could mostly be a kind of poison, and the spy girl makes sure to spread it nicely all over her sword. She puts on her spy disguise and heads out of her tent, but is not able to find any guard outside. She continues to sneak around the camp with no one in her line of sight, which is already suspicious enough as it is. Anyway, the spy girl has only one mission in mind, and that is to get rid of Ryu. She enters his tent and finds his bed where someone is shown to be sleeping under a blanket. Sakuya readies her blade and pulls off the blanket, after which she strikes with full force. However, our hero is not such a fool that he would fall into such a simple trap, as we can see that there is only a decoy under the blanket. She is shocked to see this, and then she suddenly senses someone coming from behind her. Sakuya prepares to take evasive action, but our hero is too fast for her and he lands a blow on her body. Sakuya tries to counter him, but his body disappears into thin air, which confuses her even more. That's when Ryu actually shows up and smacks her sword away to ensure she is defeated. With that, Sakuya falls to the ground with two basic smacks and she sees both Rora and Sarah in front of her. As expected, it's a dead end for the spy girl and her genius plan turned out to be extremely basic. Seeing the slave girls makes Sakuya wonder what's going on, and she thinks that they're both Sarah, who is using a shadow clone technique. Ryu has had enough of Sakuya's nonsense, so he simply smacks her on the back of her neck with a karate chop and knocks her out. Leonie also comes to the scene, which means that this whole thing was planned right from the start. Some time passes by, after which Sakuya finally wakes up from her passed out state. Ryu playfully wishes her a good morning, and we can see that the slave girl has been tied up as his hostage. Our hero is smiling as always, and he teases the spy girl by saying they can finally talk properly this way now. Sakuya is not interested in fun and games right now, so she says that Ryu only wants to torture her. The spy girl acts brave and says that she might be cute and curvy, but she is actually a shinobi girl, which means that she is ready to face the worst possible treatment. Of course, hearing the word shinobi strikes a different kind of chord for Ryu, because he has heard this term before. He confirms once again if he heard Sakuya correctly, and it makes her gasp. Our hero makes a shady face as he says this, so it gives Sakuya the wrong message. She asks him if he is giving her a trick question and calls him a creep for looking at her with unspeakable intention. That is obviously not the case for Ryu, but Sakuya continues to call him shady for having intrusive thoughts about her. It leads to a hilarious situation where even Rora and Sarah become a bit confused. Sakuya calls out Ryu for having his eyes on her curvy body, and she continues to say things like he has no shame even though he has 2 slave girls to satisfy him. Even Leone is taken aback by these words, and Ryu has no idea why he keeps finding himself in these situations. Of course, Rora does not like it when someone talks about her master this way, but Ryu tells her to take it easy with the magic for now. Now that everyone has had a breather, our hero tells Sakuya that the reason he has captured her is because he has a personal interest in her. Naturally, the spy girl thinks that he only wants to violate her to satisfy his intrusive thoughts. Ryu says he's not that kind of boy, and then he shows her the blade she had used while trying to attack him. Our hero wants to know why the spy girl is using such a sword, because there is only one place from where this kind of weapon could have come. This means only one thing, and that is Sakuya being a Japanese girl. Ryu asks her this question in hopes for a positive response, but the spy girl can't even say the word properly. She even asks what it means because she has never heard the term before. The blatant ignorance on Sakuya's face is not what Ryu had expected to see. Now, before anything else can happen, an old man suddenly appears out of the wild, and everyone is confused. Sakuya, though, can recognize him because he is her grandfather. She wants to know what he is doing here, but the old man says that he is only here as an insurance in case she failed her mission to assassinate Ryu. Sakuya is a bit puzzled by this, so she asks him why such is the case. Rora and Sarah are ready for action, so they look to their master for his orders, but he tells them to calm down for now. The old man is impressed by Ryu's composure, and he comments that our hero does not look too surprised to see him here. This can only mean one of 2 things, out of which the first thing is that Ryu is a fool who does not have the ability to assess a situation. The second thing is that our hero is such a big shot that such issues would never even bother him at all. Ryu reveals that he was actually surprised to see the old man, but that's only because he doesn't remember inviting him here. He even smiles as he says this, so the old man gains a new kind of respect for our hero. After all, he was able to defuse the situation with ease by saying such simple things. Since he has such a strong presence of mind, the old man decides to ask Ryu why he hasn't taken Sakuya's life. After all, it doesn't make sense to keep the girl alive who tried to end your life. On top of that, the old man has no idea why Ryu is not trying to take him as his prisoner as well. Our hero tells him that if he was listening to his chat with Sakuya right from the start, then he should already have the answer to his question. The old man seems to know this, but he wants to confirm it for himself. That's when Ryu explains that he has come from another world called Earth, and he feels that he is from the same clan as the old man and Sakuya. This gets the old man interested, as he believes that Ryu might also be a descendant from the Hinamoto race of warrior men. Our hero confirms what he says, but mentions that his country is called Japan in his era. It's rather interesting for the old man to hear this because from what he had heard, the men from Japan have now become useless and are like cowards who do not know how to fight. Luckily, a warrior as strong as Ryu still exists in that world, so there is something to be glad about. Of course, Ryu is as cool as a cucumber, but Sakuya is still in shock and awe. The old man asks her for how long is she going to stay like this, because it's becoming irritating for him. He orders her to stand up and she does as he says without any question. However, the old man then tells her to take off her clothes, which is rather shocking to hear from a grandfather. The spy girl wants to confirm what she has just heard, because to do such a thing here might just trigger Ryu's intrusive thoughts. The old man doesn't care about any of that and tells his granddaughter to do as he says because he is not going to hear any excuses. It's time to move away from this action and check up on Gerhard, who is taking a relaxing bath. He is visited by the lead night boy from Kyle's army, so he asks him if the men have been reorganized as per the plan. He does not get good news as the night boy says that they will need more time than what was earlier estimated. He wants to say sorry for this situation, but Gerhard is not having any of it, so he lashes out at him with rage. He is annoyed because the soldiers have been put to work for 3 whole days and there is nothing to show for it. He wonders why so much time is being wasted even though they lost the first battle with ease. After all, he does have over 60,000 soldiers on standby, so the evil lord still has the advantage of numbers on his side. He doesn't care if there is pressure from the nobles, because he wants to make a point. Now, Gerhardt tells the Night Boy to get the men ready for another attack and states that they will leave for a place named Heraklion tomorrow. However, he is met with yet another shock when the Night Boy explains that they have not had any luck with gathering the farmers from around the area. That's when we learn that there has been some kind of leak from within the army because the farmers have been talking about the massive loss they had suffered against Ryu. As a matter of fact, it has even become a hot topic which has allowed more rumors to be spread amongst the farmers. What's even worse is that the details have gotten out of hand, with people talking about how Kyle and his 5,000 soldiers almost got completely destroyed in battle. They are also talking about the mystery water move that made the river turn into a tsunami attack that drowned most of the soldiers. Of course, the main subject of their rumors is our hero Ryu, who is being treated like some demon from another world who has come here to rule the kingdom. This is clearly a matter of importance, so Gerhardt wants to know how so much intel got leaked into the public domain. After all, peasants should not be talking about Ryu or even knowing his name. The Night Boy has nothing to say to this, and even he wants to know how the common folk have been able to get a hold of this information. Basically, now that Kyle's failure is known by everyone, the farmers are in a state of unrest and won't even listen to what their own soldiers have to say. At this rate, gathering even 50,000 soldiers is going to be an uphill task. None of this pleases Gerhardt, and he rises up from his bath in a fit of rage to scold the Night Boy. He says that the rumors need to be put to rest, and he doesn't care what needs to be done to make it happen. With that, the evil lord shows a sense of panic and wonders why bad things keep happening to him. Of course, we all know that he deserves it all, but then Gerhardt thinks back to some men he had met and wonders if Ryu has the devil on his side. He is about to cause some serious damage to his pool area, but before he can do that, we move back to the camp where Sakuya is being disrobed by her own grandfather. It's a rather intense sequence as the old man uses some impressive moves to get the job done. Ryu notices this technique and wonders if it's the IAI method at first, but then realizes that it's too old school to be from such an era. Either way, our hero finds it impressive that the old man is able to cut through Sakuya's clothes without needing to touch anything else. This might actually be a trick that Ryu would also like to use on his slave girls. Now, the old man checks the spy girl's curvy body and notices that she has been hit in her vital spots. On top of that, the blow marks are too small to have come from a fist, since this is not possible with normal punches. The old man asks Ryu if he used the spear hand method on Sakuya. Our hero simply says that he had used his knuckle fist move to deal this kind of damage. The spy girl blushes because her body is exposed, but she also realizes that Ryu was going easy on her before. The old man points out that our hero's moves could have been very effective on Sakuya, especially because he was aiming for her vital spots. This means that he could have taken her life at any given point of time, but chose to let her live, which is a huge flex in itself. It's rather impressive because for a man to be able to end someone like Sakuya with so much ease is no small feat. After all, the spy girl is considered to be the leading candidate to lead her clan in the future, even though she is cute and curvy. Ryu is pleased to hear such kind words, but even he has some questions of his own that he'd like to ask. The old man has no problem with it as long he has the knowledge to answer these questions. Now, Ryu wants to confirm something, which is the name of the clan this old man comes from. Basically, he wishes to know if the old man and Sakuya have come from the ancestors of a man who was summoned here from another world, meaning Earth. Both Rora and Sarah are shocked to hear this question, but they can sense why their master is doing this. The old man looks at our hero with a straight face and there is some silence that lingers on for a while. But then he decides to cover up Sakuya and he finally confirms Ryu's theory. It turns out that his main ancestor was summoned to this world over 500 years ago. However, unlike the case of Ryu, the ancestor was summoned along with his entire village. Naturally, this is news for our hero because he had no idea that such a thing would be possible. The old man then continues to state that large-scale summoning like this is only a thing of the past. Now, the magic users can only summon a few people to this world every year. Ryu puts his brains to work and realizes that if only a handful of people are chosen every year, then he is essentially 1 out of 750 million candidates for the summoning process. It's horrible luck for him as well as Sato, whom he considers to be a spectacles guy. This revelation also makes him wonder if there are other Japanese people like him out there in this world who are trying to live their best lives over here, even after learning the old man's history. He wants to know why his clan is working like a gang of assassins. After all, such a clan goes by a certain name back in Japan, and that's when the old man reveals that his people are called Rappa. This is big news for Ryu because Rappa is the old-fashioned way of saying the word ninja. It's an awesome piece of information, but our hero does not understand why the old man and his clan are living as vagabonds. Ninjas are mainly known to settle down at a local castle or something, so this just feels a little left field. The old man is not too impressed with this line of questioning, so he tells Ryu that it's none of his business to know such things. Surprisingly, our hero does not get offended by this, but rather realizes that he might be asking a bit too much from an ancient-era man. He bows his head to the old man and says sorry for coming across as rude, which makes both his slave girls wonder why he's behaving like this. As expected, the old man likes Ryu's manners and is glad to see his behavior, which is in line with the traditional Japanese methods. With this, he is finally comfortable enough to share his name, which is revealed to be Gino. Since he is now fond of our hero, he decides to let the past be the past and chooses to become friends with Ryu. Of course, Ryu is a bit confused because Gino's statement implies that they were enemies up until now. Gino is in no mood to mix words, so he says that he knows our hero wants to use Sakuya as his own personal slave. It's basically the main reason why he's kept her alive till now. Since Gino had his reservations about Ryu and his shady intentions, he had decided to sneak attack him. But after having this chat, he is now confident in letting him act out his intrusive thoughts with Sakuya. Of course, the main reason for the spy girl to be of use to Ryu is because of her ninja skills, but she is shocked to see how her own grandfather is selling her off like some used toy. Gino doesn't just stop at that, as he also offers his own services to Ryu, which makes Sakuya even more shocked. Obviously, it is not like she has any say in the matter because she did just fail her mission, and that too, without even making her target sweat. Usually, the penalty for such a horrible performance would be the end of life, but in this case, she is only being turned into a slave girl. Gino is in no mood for his granddaughter to start acting out her drama, so he reminds her of the ways of their clan. Since our hero went through the trouble of sparing Sakuya's life, the least she can do is serve him as per his needs. The spy girl is in a tight spot after being told such heavy words, but she is unable to say anything about it. Ryu wants to know if she is being made to do something that she does not like, but the truth is that her reasons are much more complicated. After all, the way of the ninja dictates that one must never abandon their job no matter what the cost may be. This is what Sakuya has been taught right since when she was a child, and it was none other than Gino who passed on these teachings to her. Now, we see Gino and Sakuya heading back to their clan with a clear plan in mind. The spy girl wants to know if her ninja grandfather is pleased with the way things have gone, and he says that he still needs to test something out. There is a slight possibility for what he has in mind, but if that comes through, then Gino's clan's vagabond days may finally come to an end sooner than he might have imagined. A week passes by since this incident, and now we are in Ryu's tent where Rora is asking him if he made the right decision by sparing Sakuya. After all, trust is very hard to earn these days. But all our hero can think of is the katana sword in his hands. Rora watches on in confusion as her master simply looks at the sword and praises how it shines. He asks her how she feels about the sword, but Rora does not want her master to take things lightly. Ryu can sense that his slave girl is not happy with his mercy, so he asks her for her true feeling. She says that Ryu should not have spared the slave girl and Gino because they are assassins who had come here to take his life. If that is how they are in general, then it's only a matter of time before they are going to betray him. Of course, our hero knew this right from the start, which is why he agrees with what Rora is saying. However, his intention was always to let these ninja folks swim around from the start. It might have slowed down the overall schedule by a bit, but it's nothing to worry about. The slave girl is not buying into her master's charming words because she can see that he is completely in love with the katana sword. Ryu does admit that he was a bit swayed when the old man presented him with the sword as a gift of their friendship. However, he also believes that he can trust them more than the knights, although he would like to keep these thoughts a secret. Is there going to be another betrayal? And when is our hero finally going to act on his intrusive thoughts with his slave girls? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 6. See you soon. Of course, trusting the elder and Sakuya could be a bit too risky for someone like Ryu, but he seems to be fine with them. Rora asks him why he feels this way, but he is unable to give her a proper reason. After all, the only things that come to mind are the issues that have come up so far with the elder and people like him. However, Ryu chooses not to say anything about them and simply tells Rora that it's just the way it is. The slave girl has no idea why her master is acting this way, and she tells him that she won't be able to understand anything from what he has just told her. She even looks at Ryu with angry eyes, and he wonders why his slave girl is resisting his words. After all, if this were Boltz or someone else, then they would have just accepted it the way he said it. Rora has had enough of playing around, so she screams at her own master and says that he is only siding with the elder because of the fancy spear he has given Ryu as a gift. For a moment, our hero even says yes, but then he tries to correct himself by saying that is not the main reason. This awakens Rora's biggest fear, and then she asks Ryu if it is because he likes Sakuya the way a shady man would. Ryu panics and tells Rora that he is most definitely not having any intrusive thoughts for Sakuya, so she should not worry about her at all. He has no other option left, so he simply tells Rora that he wants people who are good at being spies. Rora is still not pleased with her master's reason, but she can accept this one. After all, if he has made this choice after careful thinking, then the slave girl has no issue with it. However, she maintains that our hero should not let his guard down just yet, as they don't know everything about the elder. Hearing Rora talk like this reminds our hero of his time back in Japan, so he chuckles, but the slave girl thinks that he is making fun of her. The nostalgia may be hitting him hard, but it's time to get back to work as Leone walks into the room to tell Ryu that the Road Syrian Knights have finally come here. This alerts both Ryu and Rora, so they decide to spring right back into action. Now we shift outside where a whole bunch of knights have shown up and waiting for our hero to show himself. Leading the way is none other than Elena herself, who is finally wearing her knight armor once again after so many years. She says sorry for making Ryu wait, but now that she is here, it is time to fulfill her promise to him. The various squads take a look at each other and accept that they are going to embark on a massive mission now. Meanwhile, there are other things happening on the military front as we see the main villain, Duke Gerhardt, in a state of panic. He has been told by General Hod Ram that the entire military power should be handed over to him. The general simply smirks upon this statement and says that it's one way to cut a long story short. After all, he feels that if the command was given to him instead of the useless Kyle, then they would have won the battles they had fought with ease. The Duke does not take too kindly to these words and scolds Hod Ram for speaking out of turn. On top of that, he is just a runaway general, so it's not like he has the right to ask for such authority. Gerhardt then tells us that he decided to hold this war council because Hod Ram had said he has a great idea. However, he has shown himself to be a rat by simply asking for power and bringing up the last defeats his army has faced. It's a rather sorry state of affairs, as we can see a lot of injured soldiers being treated for their wounds as well. As the Duke stares at Hod Ram, the evil general thinks to himself that when other people have tried to cross him, he has always cut them off, so this is no different. He simply wants Gerhardt play along with him so that he can eventually wring him dry. On the other hand, the Duke is simply clueless and has no idea on what Hod Ram could be planning next. As of now, the evil general has around 2,000 men under his command, while Gerhardt has over 20,000 men, although they are being reorganized at the moment. Having said that, he does have a cavalry of men to go along with his conscripted farmers. So if he wanted to, then it would not be too hard for him to remove Hod Ram by force. Things are getting tense, but at this very moment, a voice from behind says that he completely agrees with what Hod Ram is saying. Duke Gerhardt and General Hod Ram both look on in shock as the person saying this is none other than Kyle himself. He feels that he was not clear enough the first time, so he decides to rephrase his sentence. Kyle again says that he feels they should just hand over all the military power and authority over to Hod Ram. As expected, this makes the whole war committee go into a state of gossip and amusement. Nobody has come up with an answer just yet, but Kyle explains that he has failed the Duke because he lost the match against Ryu despite having so many men and resources under his belt. Kyle then suggests that the only way to beat an enemy who is able to defeat him would be hand over the reins to a general who has more power and authority than him. Of course, Duke Gerhardt does not want to hear this from his commanding officer, so he asks Kyle if he knows what he's talking about. He then takes a look at Hod Ram and accuses him of sneakily getting Kyle to join his side of the faction. The evil general would normally smile or say something menacing at this time, but he is just as clueless as the Duke, so Gerhardt is shocked to know that Kyle is saying this out of his own free will. Kyle then asks the Duke if it is really so surprising for him to side with Hod Ram. He confesses that since he lost in the big skirmish, He is ready to take all the blame for it. However, this does not mean that he will just stand here and let himself be shamed as a knight. None of this is making any sense to Gerhardt, so he asks Kyle what he means by being shamed. Since the Duke is not able to get what he is saying, Kyle states that Gerhardt is not really the kind of man who should be leading the knights. He then goes on to mock the Duke by saying he is not a king, and does not even have any kind of interest in marital arts. All that he has done so far has been sitting in a comfy chair and barking orders at men like Kyle. He then says that Gerhardt had disgraced him and other knights with his sword while toying with his life. However, it seems that the evil Duke did not even realize the magnitude of his actions at the time, which was the biggest disgrace to knights. Gerhardt is not just going to sit there and take all this blame, so he reminds Kyle that he is his boss. The horses, soldiers, and every other thing that Kyle has right now is because he had lent these to him. Kyle agrees with this statement, but also mentions that he does not want these resources to go to waste, which is why he is suggesting their best path to victory. One of the lords has had enough of this horseplay, so he tells Kyle to give it to them straight. Kyle then states that if he has to continue under someone like Duke Gerhardt, who does not even know the A, B, or C of war, then he would be better off as not alive any longer. This is as blunt as he can be, but while Gerhardt is in absolute shock, Hodram simply laughs away with all his might. He then tells Kyle that it really is a great honor to know how much he values him as a general. Now the other lords also have a quick chat with each other, and then a bald lord says that if this really is the best way to secure a win, then he does not see the issue in agreeing with Hodram. Gerhardt gets upset to see the tide shifting away from him. And soon enough, the other lords also tell him that they all want the same thing at the end of the day. Hodram continues by telling the Duke not to worry too much about him because he will be able to bring out the full potential of all his soldiers to their max points. He reassures the other lords that with him at the helm of the army, he will most definitely be able to defeat Princess Lupis and her faction. This is all it takes to secure a unanimous victory from all the other lords who praise Hodram for his bravery and ask him to bring victory back to their camp. Of course, Gerhardt is not too pleased to hear this because it's like a total nightmare for him. Later on in the mansion, we can see the Duke alone at his table wondering why and how it all went wrong for him. His main issue is that there is no one right now who stands with him despite the fact that he is from such a noble family. He does not get why he is being treated so poorly by uncivilized filth, and he is even more annoyed at the fact that the other nobles agreed with the snakes. From the looks of it, he is probably going to become a victim of a coup d'etat. As Gerhardt ponders his next move, a suspicious man enters his room and asks him to raise his head. The Duke seems to recognize who he is, but we are not shown his face. In a desperate bid to be saved, the Duke rushes to the man and asks for his help, as he has nowhere else to turn to. This is not a flattering sight, but the shady man tells us that his country had ordered him to prolong the civil war for at least half a year. However, with the way things are going here, it will not be possible unless he does something about it. Now he tells the Duke that he has a plan, so he does not need to worry. Gerhardt is pleased to hear this, and he asks the man if he can do something about this situation. He says yes, and even though Hodram has limited their actions by taking over the military forces, there is a way out of this. Gerhardt does not want to recall how he was bested so easily, but the shady man asks him to listen till the end. He goes on to say that the Duke should not take Ryu so lightly, because he was able to defeat Kyle with a water attack. On top of that, he has also been able to circulate a rumor nicely after winning the battle. Gerhardt does not know what rumor he is talking about, but then it strikes him that Ryu could have been spreading nonsense about the Herakleon demon. The shady man says yes and adds that once such fear has been ingrained into a person's heart, it will not be easy to take it away. This goes on to prove that the enemy is a very clever man from all angles, so it would not be surprising if Ryu has laid out any other traps for the nobles. The Duke is at a loss for words. But he wants to know why the shady man is telling him these things. He wonders if he wants him to warn Hod Ram about it. But the shady man says that it won't do them any good to help out the evil general. Rather, he wishes to use this demon rumor to his advantage instead. So it looks like things are going to get very interesting very soon. Now we shift to Ryu, who is overlooking his army, and then Rora shows up to tell him that the enemy is not really looking like they are going to attack the fortress anymore. This leads her to wonder if the enemy wants to settle the score once and for all at the plains. Hero thinking that a decisive battle in the plains, which is full of wheat fields, may not be the best idea for a kingdom. After all, their resources will get exhausted, and it will be very difficult for them to calculate their own taxes later. Normally, this does not make any kind of sense if you are going to war. However, Ryu is also aware that this kingdom is known for bringing harm to its own citizens, so such an act may not be beyond them. On top of this, Ryu knows that the rumor that he has spread must be affecting the enemy, because most of their squad is filled with conscripted farmers. If that isn't good enough, our hero also has Princess Lupis, Elena, and all their men have also joined in, which means that Ryu has the upper hand in terms of military strength and tactics. All the stars seem to be aligned for our hero, so he feels that this should be an easy win for them. Rora and Sarah can see that their master is a bit perplexed, so they tell him that winning the war is a good thing. He acknowledges what they say, but also admits that this is way too easy for him and his team. As a matter of fact, it's looking too good to be true, which is why Ryu feels that something is up. At this very moment, he hears a voice calling out to him, and it's none other than Elena herself. She is with her night boy Chris on top of the watchtower, and she hands him her sword to hold on for a bit. He does as she says, but then Elena jumps off the watchtower, much to his shock and awe. Chris calls out to the Night Lady, but she's too busy trying to make an entrance. She declares that she is the Knight of Darkness who will send this world into a void only to return to the same void in the end. With that, Elena announces her arrival, which confounds the slave girls as well as their master. Ryu tells Elena that she is looking a bit too excited. Much more so because she is always shown as gloomy and sad when she is at the royal capital. She simply says that the air of the front line is really good and has pumped her up. But Ryu maintains that women can be scary at times. She then comments on how amazing it was for our hero to be able to make such a strong fortress in such short time and with limited resources. The fortress reminds her of a bridgehead, and Ryu is surprised to see that the Night Lady has overlooked it. He simply tells Elena that it's not as amazing as it may seem, but she states that too much humility will simply go in vain. She is sure that the princess will love the fortress when she sees it, but this brings our hero to the main point. He informs Elena that Mikhail has gone missing and explains that he launched an attack on the enemy despite being told only to scout the area. This is a disaster and also a violation of military rules, because it does not matter what the reason may be when you go against your duties. Elena laments the fact that Mikhail had to be caught when he was the one who was supposed to watch over Ryu. Elena says that this is really bad, so our hero asks her if Mikhail missing in action will affect his credibility with Princess Lupis. Elena reassures him that it's nothing along those lines, but it's still a problem because Mikhail was a very loyal knight who had served the princess right since she was a child. As a matter of fact, she must have known him the longest out of anyone else in this army. Elena is about to say something else, but she decides against it at the very last moment and tells Ryu not to bother with it. She says that she will be the one to inform Princess Lupis about what happened to Mikhail, but Ryu has some doubts. Even so, he decides to trust Elena with this info and lets her be. It's time to be the bearer of bad news, so Elena heads over to Lupis and her camp, where she is surrounded by all her guards. She goes on to explain the whole Mikhail situation to the princess, and she clearly seems to be troubled by it. Lupis has a lot on her mind, but she manages to maintain her cool and tell Elena thanks for her report. Now the princess turns to Miltina and tells her to give her some alone time for now. She is a bit confused to see Lupis acting like this, but the princess insists, so Meltina has no other option but to do as she says. The other guards also clear the area to let their princess be alone, and then we see Lupis crying over losing Mikhail. She thinks back to all her pleasant memories with him and becomes very emotional about it. The princess also prays to God that he is all right and not in any kind of mess. At this very moment, a shady man walks into her room and comments on how she looks like she is going through some grief. This makes Lupis alert, so she turns to see who this man is. He has hidden his face with a robe, so the princess believes he could be an assassin who has come here to take her life. She immediately calls out to her guards, but the man says that it is of no use. He seems to have used some kind of trick that has sent all of the guards outside to a dreamland, so it's just him and the princess now. He then says that based on the princess's response, he will decide whether to keep Mikhail alive. Lupis is shocked, so she asks the man who he is and what he wants from her. Now he takes off his robe to reveal a shady face and says that he is only here to have a chat with the princess, so she does not need to be so alert. He then goes on to ask her if she is ready to trade the war for the life of her precious Mikhail. This is clearly a ploy to strong-arm the princess, and the man does not shy away from telling her that he will only spare Mikhail if she does as he says. Lupis is still reeling from the fact that Mikhail is alive, but then she realizes that she is being given a threat by the shady man. First of all, she wants to know who he is and how he was able to sneak into this tent without anyone else knowing. He simply smiles and decides to give her an intro about himself, starting with his name, which is Isekai'd. He basically says that he is a humble man's liaison, and then we see all the knights who are sleeping outside the tent. He goes on to talk about Ryu and how competent he is as a leader. After all, it was our hero who forced Sudu to swim all the way here to try and gain some leverage. She is clearly confused by what he is saying, so Sudu then states that he had to swim in the river Thebe upstream. He also explains how he had to swim while keeping his back in the water, which is hard for an old man like him. This may seem like idle talk to others, but the princess is wary of what Sudu is saying, because it is not easy to swim for so long on your own. Plus, there were soldiers patrolling the river area as well, so she wants to know what this shady man is planning. She asks him for his ultimate goal and says that he should stop fooling around with her. The princess also sneakily gets her sword from under the pillow, and then Sudu smiles and tells her that he works under Duke Gerhardt. This means that he is the same man who was talking to the Duke earlier about the demon rumors. However, his connection to Gerhardt is not the typical kind, so he asks Lupis if he can sit in the chair to rest his shaking legs. After all, old age is something that no one can win against. Now Sudu takes a seat and tells the princess that Duke Gerhardt is planning to swear his allegiance to her. Naturally, this comes as a shock to Lupis, and she tells the old man that he may have heard the wrong thing. She believes that the Duke must have asked Sudu to come and ask her to surrender, but he says that is not the case. Either way, the princess is upset because it's not like she is going to listen to any pleads from Gerhardt. He was the one who caused this whole mess in the first place by talking about a child whom no one even knew of till he mentioned it. It is foolish to think that he can ask for the princess to forgive him after all that he's done. So she tells Sudu that Gerhardt can rot away for all she cares. Sudu is only going to play his own cards, so he tells her that she also needs to think about Mikhail's life. He even goes on to ask her if she trusts anyone else in this camp as much as Mikhail. Hearing this makes the princess a bit conscious, but then a weapon comes flying and targeted at Sudu. He manages to evade the weapon, but only because it was aimed at the chair, and then he comments that it is a rather dangerous item. The old man is amazed to see that someone would attack him without a warning, and even though he is an intruder, it looks like the treatment being given to him is rather cruel. He then takes out the weapon to reveal that it is the chakra that Ryu had taken for himself earlier. Sudu knows that our hero is the only man who can use such an item, so he calls out to him hoping to have a chat. One more chakra is fired at Sudu, but he manages to dodge this one by stopping the weapon with his chair. Sudo senses that our hero is ignoring him, so he asks Ryu to come out and show himself. After all, he is looking like a fool talking to himself as of this moment. But all of this is a distraction to save the princess. From behind her, we see Meltina sneakily showing up and taking her hand. Sudo notices this, but he can't act because Meltina takes the princess away before he can do anything about it. Meltina says sorry to Lupis for being neglectful, and she promises to make up for it some other time. Till then, she shouts out to Ryu to inform him that the princess is in safe hands. Our hero gets his cue, so he orders his men to set the tent on fire. They do as they're told, and soon enough, we see the entire tent set ablaze with Ryu standing in front of it like a total boss man. Of course, Lupis does not want Sudo to burn down because she wants to know more about Mikhail. She asks Meltina to stop the fire and save the old man. But this is very confusing. Meltina asks her princess why she is speaking like this, but Lupis says that she has a lot left to ask him. This would mean saving the life of a suspected assassin. But Meltina declares that it is too late to act on that request now. However, much to her surprise, the old man is shown to be alive, and he says that everyone is being too cruel on him. The others are in shock and awe as to how Sudo was able to survive the fire, but he simply brushes off the flames and says that they ended up burning his best clothes. Ryu gets ready to attack, and he asks Sudo if he is even an actual human. The old man is glad to see our hero finally ready to talk to him, so he tries to begin a line of dialogue. However, Ryu is not ready to give in to what Sudo wants, so he picks up his blade and gets ready to attack him. Sudo can see that our hero is not very sociable, and he laments it. But Ryu could not care less, and he charges at him with all his might. Sudo is able to block his attack with his own knives, which comes as a surprise to our hero. Even so, he continues with his onslaught, which proves to be a bit too much for the old man. He asks Ryu to calm down because the quality of their weapons is not uniform, so it would be better for them to postpone their battle. Ryu does not listen to a word he says and continues with the onslaught, so Sudo begins to sweat. He can't afford to fight our hero here, and it only gets worse when Ryu assumes the fire stance. This means that our hero is about to use a finisher move, which does not bode well at all for Sudo. He can't afford to lose his life over here and comments that this is not an ideal situation. That's when Princess Lupis screams at Ryu, begging him to stop his attacks. He says he has no reason to hold back, but then Lupis says that she will explain it all to him if he just listens. Our hero is not too keen on this, but he does as the princess says and lowers his sword. Sudo can breathe a sigh of relief for now, but what exactly is his end game here? And how will Ryu counter the old man's sly tactics if he tries to use Mikhail as leverage against the princess? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 7. See you soon.